Hey guys, welcome to CastCast. This is my week one reactions and thoughts. I'm going to try to keep it brief. Some of these games I didn't watch as much. Obviously, a lot of games, 16 games this weekend. Thankfully, we had a good amount of exclusives, and I'll give my thoughts on that. But some of these will be pretty cut and dry, obviously. But in any case, looking at, and I'm just going to go in order Cowboys, Eagles, not much to say here. I would say the Philadelphia passing attack was very kind of stagnant, respectable, but nothing crazy, type of thing. It's like Jalen Hurts is completing percentages at a high clip, but just, overall, just a lot of kind of short dump off sort of things. And even the rushing attack. I thought that Dallas did a really good job, honestly, of defending the run and not giving Saquon, a ton of breathing room. I mean, longest run was 16 yards. Last year, we were kind of used to him breaking a huge run pretty regularly type of thing. But I do think that the props should go to the Cowboys in this game. Everybody called Philadelphia. I called Philadelphia, but I was a little worried that they were going to lose type of thing. The thing that I'll say about Dallas, though, is they really need to make sure that they can play against mobile quarterbacks, in this game is the one takeaway. They didn't mind their gaps, which when you play with Jalen Hurts, twice a year, and Jaden Daniels twice a year, and who the heck knows if Jackson Dart eventually starts for the Giants, he's, an athletic talent. So you got to be able to respect the lanes and the ability of these guys. But otherwise, the Cowboys, I think Williams had life. I liked what he did. I think Miles Sanders showed that he has life still. Obviously the turning point of the game, though, was when he had a fumble. And, that kind of took the steam out of the Cowboys, and they were able to kind of stay in it. But if they had scored there, it could have been a completely different outcome. I think that one other thing that I noticed on the Eagles, and not to just, poke fun at them type of thing, but Quinyon Mitchell, he looked a little rough when it's like last year, this dude was so good as a rookie that I didn't think you'd have to worry too much about it. But perhaps it is the pass rush and the fact that Jalen Carter obviously didn't play a down this game, type of thing. And then the thing that I guess I think about too with Philadelphia, overall their defense looked average, and that third corner spot, not the best. But, I got to give props to, Dallas. Who knows if Jalen Carter just kind of lit a fire underneath them. But I do think that they played better than anyone was going to give them credit for. And, they could be a very high-powered offense, obviously, this year. Moving on to Chargers-Chiefs. I actually had the Chargers winning this game, and they did do a very, very good job. Now, I didn't, really think that Xavier Worthy would just get knocked out of the game and leave Patrick Mahomes with essentially Kelsey, and, essentially, Hollywood Brown, who actually did have a sneaky, kind of quiet, good game type of thing. But he obviously had one long game and then a bunch of, chip down unders. And, was a high target kind of thing. Juju chipped in. Kelsey, didn't really do much besides getting left open on a blown coverage, type of thing, which it's week one. I like to call it the week one anomaly, where you're looking at these things and, sometimes the defense will just screw up or whatever else. Or, sometimes the offense screws up. A guy doesn't run the right route, and the quarterback will throw some predetermined thing where it's like, oh yeah, and it ends up being a pick, or, it can happen to both sides, but most of the time I feel like it's a blown defensive coverage type of thing. But hopefully Xavier Worthy isn't out too long and it's not a terrible shoulder injury, because those can really, really suck. Now, in terms of the Chargers, I liked what Herbert was doing. He did a very, very good job, of carrying the team. Wasn't completely clean type of thing all the time, but he did a very good job of being resilient and that sort of thing. I liked Hampton's running. Nothing crazy, but he kept on fighting throughout the whole game, which is what you want. Najee Harris only got one carry, unfortunately. You like to see them in a heavy rushing attack, get him a little bit more involved type of thing, but it was for 5 yards type of thing. I liked what I saw from Quentin Johnston. It didn't seem like he had a drop issue, and his confidence was there. And, overall that was, it was a good thing for me, with him, and that it's like, it seemed like he kind of, he resetted and he's got a better focus for catching the football. And then it's like, Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen, I think this is a very complete wide receiver core. And even Trey Harris getting in on the action a little bit, where, he had the one target for 11 yards and his sideline throw, very, very good, which I like. But they have a lot more ammunition. And even Tyler Conklin, who I liked on the Jets last year, didn't have a crazy chance to shine, obviously, because it's the Jets, but very, very good. Him and Will Dissly, are kind of these, can be sneaky, rangy kind of players that are just, I don't think Dissly's that underrated. Maybe he is, but Conklin, I think, is kind of underrated, if I'm being honest with you. The defense picked up where they left off. And, overall, I think they made Mahomes kind of have to run against them type of thing more than, he does. And he usually does that in the postseason. But like, they did a good job against the one. They did a good job at making sure the yak did not exist on the Chiefs. Really putting a gag on the ability of the Chiefs to be able to, get downfield and make it a little bit easier on themselves. But I like what the Chargers did, and I expect them to continue to get better, type of thing. And they were up against, pretty good defense type of thing. Moving on to Cardinals Saints. This one isn't that much of a shocker. Kyler Murray doing well. Nothing crazy. The Saints, unsurprisingly to me, getting after Kyler. I think Kyler has just, not that he has the worst O-line type of thing, but it's like he, going up against this team, they've always been kind of a very pressure-oriented defense. And that's why, they've been able to go through these, and get rid of Marshawn Lattimore type of thing and just be very, very sound and limiting, and getting after the quarterback type of thing. Spencer Rattler, they made him throw way too damn much. I don't understand it. You draft a guy like Devin Neal who could potentially become something, only rush him twice, and they clearly had good, rushing attack against Arizona, which I think that Arizona's defense is more built to defend the run. But, perhaps, they, with the new, and it's kind of wild to me because you have, Mond, who came from the Eagles and they were a rushing team last year. Perhaps this, he looks back at this and he does it a bit more because it's, with the Cardinals, they have Calais Campbell. They have, I'm trying to remember the dude that they drafted type of thing. Josh Sweat's good against the run. I don't think I even see his name on here. Zaven Collins is good against the run. Calais Campbell, like I said. Buda Baker, just an all-around, beast. Perhaps, perhaps this is just one of those things that they didn't play the rookie that, I'm thinking of, and I'm trying to remember his name. One of the D tackles that had off-the-field issues that they got. But New Orleans, really happy with them. They obviously got, to Kyler a lot, which is not the easiest thing, to do type of thing. But I am glad that Rattler had some yards type of thing. And it's like, yeah, his QBR wasn't the highest, yet make him guy pass this much. Are they really trying to get, see and gauge type of thing? But it's like, he spread the ball around a lot, which is good. So a lot of people kind of shit on the Saints and say they're going to be the worst team this year and they're going for Archie Manning. Who the heck knows? But overall, I think a game where it's like, oh, Arizona, I think they have them being a lot better than what they performed this game. And Marvin Harrison, I guess, was supposed to kind of step up type of thing. But this offense still clearly, Trey McBride is kind of the top target, which you don't expect with a guy like Marvin Harrison, even though I really, really like Trey McBride. Moving on to Colts Dolphins. The Dolphins, I thought would be a little bit better, but good Lord, it's almost like teams just know them very, very well. But Daniel Jones, and I honestly have always thought that the jury should never be out on a guy like this. Don't get me wrong, last year he had the most talent he'd ever have on offense. I guess, in the passing attack, obviously losing Saquon makes it harder on you type of thing. And it's like goes for 22 of 29, doesn't even have to run it a crazy amount, I guess, and that sort of thing, which is what he's known for, Vanilla Vic over here. And just played a very sound game. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not like it was against, a crazy good team or anything like that. But the Colts, the Colts, one of these teams that it's like, it's not like you have, the craziest weapons either, where it's like you have Pittman, Warren, I guess, getting a lot of, kind of thing as a unicorn. Hopefully this is helping, obviously, type of thing, with the more weapons. And then you got Alec Pierce, who's serviceable. Mo Alley Cox has always been kind of a, shadowy tight end type of thing. And then it's like Adonai Mitchell, and it's like and Josh Downs, like they don't really have any sort of like crazy, this guy is going to make it easier on the quarterback unless Warren really kind of keeps this up, which, he may, but, it's tough. These tight ends get drafted in the first round and they're not very good usually, they're not always good, they're not bad, but they're not always good type of thing. But it's like the Miami just seems like a great big mess. It seems like they're going to go into full reset, if I'm being honest with you, type of thing. The defense, Jordan Brooks was a good addition, I think. And it's like he's obviously doing the workload for the tackling. But it's like overall, it just kind of looks to me like the Dolphins, it isn't good to me. And them pulling and putting in Zach Wilson, I think Zach Wilson's definitely a dude that, he should get a shot, type of thing. Tua with 2 picks, not a good thing. But yeah, props to the Colts. I can't even remember who I picked for this game. That's how much I was like, who do we pick? Raiders, Pats. The Raiders looked like a very, very different team. I liked what Genty did, but it is no surprise to me that he had a tough time against a Patriot defense with Vrabel. Who knows? You got to stop the run. Obviously, Brock Bowers, the unicorn. What a freak! And he's gonna keep on doing, his things. I think Jacoby Myers. I think he's gonna be happy with the way the offense is, and I think he's not gonna really press on this trade thing anymore, type of thing. And I have always liked him. Dante Thorne Jr., kind of this taller, leaner, fast guy. Getting targets and having, good deep playability. This is a very balanced offense. And I like that they got Michael Mayer involved. It's like, I think they have a good amount of, talent, and even Jack Beck getting a nice reception. I just think that the Raiders are going to be a lot better because their QB play will at least, be average, if not a little bit better. But, I like the way they played. Drake May, I think, was still pressured a lot. They clearly couldn't run a lot, which I think is kind of weird. Obviously you look at TreVeyon Henderson and you're like, oh, he had a good average. He had a 14-yard run out of 27 yards. So it's like he had 4 carries for, around, 13 yards, which isn't terrible type of thing. But they clearly kind of want to run like a, split back type of thing, but Ramondre Stevenson, nothing crazy type of thing. But, Drake May passing 46 times, it kind of worries me. We can't really have that. He was sacked 4 times type of thing, So against a defense where it's like you never can take for granted, you can never take for granted you can never take for granted, what's going to happen with a guy like Max Crosby on the other side. And, especially since he's healthy this year. But moving on, we're going to talk about Steelers-Jets. This game really shocked me. I thought the Steelers were going to kind of have it easier. They did not. They had to win off a last-second field goal, although Rodgers carried them this game and looked like the old Rodgers. Obviously, it's kind of one of those interesting things to me that, people want to discredit Rodgers. They want to talk about the off the field attitude type of thing. But it's like so many of these, players have said that, oh, he takes care of business and he shows a leadership, type of thing now that he's on the team. So it's this cliche, per what the narrative is about him. And I'm a Packers fan, but I'm still a fan of Rodgers. I think that he needs this redemption arc to close his career, and I think he can have it, type of thing. They didn't even have that good of a rushing attack either, which I kind of expected them to lean on. But nah, they leaned on Rodgers. And then Justin Fields. I really hate how everyone has really kind of compared him to early Lamar Jackson and saying he can't throw. Had a beautiful throw to Garrett Wilson, and, played the game very clean type of thing. Obviously using his legs a lot as well, but this is a guy I think the jury shouldn't be out on, where it's like this guy is, not an NFL quarterback, and he clearly showed that he can do, good things. Obviously not a ton of passes type of thing. They did try to run it quite a bit, and they did because Breece Hall really did cook, the Steelers, which I think like Steelers, and I think, oh, how are you going to run against this team? And then that makes the passing that much harder. But, ultimately it's kind of wild to me that they have, Caleb Johnson, Kenneth Gainwell both have, fumbles type of thing. And, but they get lucky with it. So it's like the Steelers very well could have lost this game, but it was definitely the Jets, to me, played a lot better, on defensively than, the score tells type of thing. But, the Steelers proven that they're the kind of the veteran team type of thing. And Boswell, the Wizard of Boz, putting it through does not surprise me. He's been one of the most clutch kickers after Justin Tucker. And now after this year, he might be considered the best in the NFL right now, depending on like what happens with Tucker. But I loved it from, both teams. And I think these teams, will have to be taken a bit more seriously because of this, but only time will tell. And maybe this is a week 1 anomaly. Commanders, Giants. The Commanders, to me, kind of stalled. They had, Jaden Daniels had a good amount of game, but it's not like they really pulled away from this Giants defense. A defense that is really good type of thing. Russell Wilson, it doesn't surprise me that he wasn't very good. This is a guy that he's only really in there, I think, to maybe mentor, but I don't even like him for that. Like, what's he going to mentor to Dart? This is a guy who wants to start. He always wants to be the starter. He just has that big of an ego type of thing. And it's like he doesn't have the escapability. He got sacked twice from a defense that we said needed to draft a pass rusher, and they don't really have a pass rusher, type of thing. So it's like looking at this, seeing that, you got Daron Payne, who's pretty good, and Dorrance Armstrong, who is also, pretty good. But it's like these are two guys that it's like never amount to being like, heavy sack leaders and proving to have consistent pressure type of thing, which is why, it's hard for me to say the Commanders are going to be able to do better than last season, despite Jaden Daniels being such an electric guy. And I think he is a game changer that's only going to get better. Now, I do like that Deebo Samuel actually kind of cooked. I don't like him really that much as a player, but at least he's kind of reignited his career and can prove that now he actually is a serviceable guy type of thing. Terry McLaurin, a little bit of that chemistry lost probably, type of thing. I'm sure he'll come along type of thing. Got only 4 targets and 2 catches type of thing, but overall, I think this team will get better. And if they do have a more balanced offense, better for them because their offense is going to need to be what, does well type of thing. And I mean, I guess that their run game better, than I would expect against a defense like this. But with a pass rush like they had, Jaden Daniels getting sacked 3 times. I think the Giants, gave the Commanders a little bit of a fit. Obviously, hard to do anything when you don't really have a rushing attack, and you have Russell Wilson, who's just, to me, he's washed. Clearly trying to get it to Neighbors a lot, and clearly Neighbors is not going to really take a step back, because I think the Commanders do have good DBs, and it's, their coverage was very good last year, and they drafted Trey Amos, who's a very good player type of thing. And it's like, we'll just see how the Commanders defense kind of shapes up, because obviously they did grab Von Miller, but I just don't know if he's just not the guy, that he was anymore. And can he stay healthy? But otherwise, interesting game. I think that this shows a lot about, they say Russell Wilson's going to start next week. I think it's only a matter of time until Dart starts and, they try to develop him, because what does this coaching staff have to lose when, Dable might get fired eventually? Moving on to Jaguars Panthers. Obviously, we had the huge delay in this game, type of thing. But the Jaguars seemingly like low scoring in the second half. Carolina, I thought, would do better. Bryce Young seemingly kind of regressed back, type of thing. Or maybe Jacksonville's defense is actually finally better type of thing, because their defense has been lackluster. It's been inconsistent. I guess inconsistent is how you could describe the Jaguars as a whole the last few years type of thing. But Bryce Young had it rough. And it's like, I guess, the running game didn't really help him all too much. They clearly did try to run it a good amount. Canales is not going to just throw Bryce Young out to the wolves type of thing. But yeah, overall not good. I do like that T-Mac, did kind of emerge as your wide receiver one target, getting targeted the most type of thing, and being able to put up, a respectable debut when his quarterback didn't do so well type of thing. But some of these other guys really have to step up. Tommy Tremble, I think, needs to be kind of that security blanket for Bryce Young, and he obviously didn't show up. But this is a Carolina team that I think, Canales is going to have coached up throughout the year, and they did get better towards the end of the year last year. And it's like I said, it's week one, and obviously this is a team that, crazy enough, they were getting torched on the run. And it's like, I'm glad Trayvon Merrick was kind of panning out and, making sure that, ETN didn't really bust loose and didn't get any TDs, I guess, but did have a 71-yard run, type of thing. But it's, it's something to be said about your safety play when you don't give up a long run, when you give up a long run like that and a TD isn't blown. But in any case, if ETN can run like this, I think kudos to them. Kudos to them, and kudos to ETN, who has been lackluster, on this team since he was drafted early. Moving on, I think Travis Hunter, did well, and that sort of thing. We'll see how long he can play both sides and that sort of thing. But overall, kind of crazy that Brian Thomas only came down with one reception off of 7 targets. He's not really the guy that I would expect to have a regression when the rest of the offense kind of pops off. I mean, the passing, I guess, respectable, nothing crazy, but he needs to be that guy, having that rapport with Lawrence, but overall good on the defensive side of the Jaguars. I think, I think this Carolina Panthers identity is going to have to develop a little bit. And you're obviously, teams are going to be knowing to prepare for Bryce Young from last year. So there might be growing pains. And if, he's always inconsistent like this, we might see them moving on from Bryce Young type of thing. But, after the season or something like that. But overall, good win by Jacksonville at home, where they have not been the best, the last few years. And kudos to them. Bengals, Browns. Not much to say here. Joe Burrow got harassed a lot. Joe Flacco actually did very, very good, besides his 2 picks, type of thing, I think, against a defense that is obviously not too good, but the Bengals really eked away with this one. They did not look great. They were able to pull past the Browns. And I mean, granted, it was a road game. It's one of these divisional ones type of thing. But it's like, this rushing attack when Chase Brown, was kind of, heralded in that sort of thing. Not that good. Chase had a lot of problems. I think that they just really struggled because of their bad O-line. That is the weak part of their offense. And they need to be able to run it better to protect Burrow. Granted, they're not going to be playing the Browns every week, but the Browns clearly showed why Flacco's the starter, type of thing. And who knows, they can give teams fits, which is kind of the identity that they've played. They've been kind of this upset team because they have good talent. They just can't put it together for whatever reason. But congrats, Cincinnati. You won week 1, even though Burrow's had a really crappy week 1 history. Buccaneers, Falcons. What a game this was. And Younghoe Koo, I'm sorry, but he has been kind of inconsistent. And I know that Atlanta Falcons fans are very frustrated with him because they, by all rights, should have won this game. Baker Mayfield didn't look the best. He missed, there was some real off-target passes, and then there was some real on-target gutsy passes. But I liked what I saw from Baker. Very resilient and, even ran for a good amount of yards type of thing. And, was always hustling type of thing. Bucky Irving kind of suffered against an Atlanta Falcons run defense that was way better than last year, which I'm surprised by because they got rid of Grady Jarrett, if I'm being honest with you. Emeka Egbuka, saw why they drafted him. Obviously Godwin, is yet to be back from his injury, and he may not be the same, because he's suffered 2 major injuries now. The Atlanta receiving core, Drake London, it kind of surprised me that he dropped 2 red zone passes that I thought he's got a good shot at, getting these with being 6'4" and the length that he is type of thing. Ray-Ray McCloud doing a lot of good things for them. This is such a talented team that they should be putting up more than 1 receiving touchdown a game. I'm sorry. And Bijan, it makes sense that he, got one of these, but it's with Pitts, London, they didn't get Darnell Mooney involved. I'm pretty sure he's still on the team, and he did great things for them last year on occasion. But it's Penix looked pretty good. I think having him pass 42 times is kind of ridiculous when you have Algier Robinson, a crazy duo, but obviously, maybe it is because they have Vita Vea that they were stuffing the run and they were kind of refusing to, lose to the run, I guess, which ended up paying off, ironically. But crazy game. I think we'll see but I do think the Falcons performed a little bit better than what we were used to on their offense. Obviously, they did do well on the passing attack, but, overall, we'll kind of see. I want to see this offense be a little bit more balanced without him having to pass so much with such a dynamic and good running back duo. 49ers Seahawks. Now, what a game this was. Purdy, to me, he passed for a good amount of yards. He had 2 touchdowns, but 2 picks. I think that this, kind of shows the kind of player he was last year. He didn't throw a ton of picks, but there were some games where he was throwing multiple picks. I still remember when they played the Lions, who were banged up as all can be when they played him, but he was throwing, he threw 2 picks to Kirby Joseph or whatever that were gimmies. And I'm still not sold on Purdy. There's a reason he didn't command a crazy amount of money type of thing. He didn't do so well when he didn't have cheat code McCaffrey. And then, this game, McCaffrey accounts for, 18 touches of the ball and, and a good amount of yards, type of thing where he's averaging a good amount. Maybe not so much rushing, but can you do well when you don't have the guy who's a cheat code, or if teams finally are able to eliminate his presence on the field? Because you look at, Kittle gets hurt, not good. Jawan Jennings, doesn't catch a whole lot. Ricky Pearsall, who is obviously entering his second year and actually had a full camp, he did as well, which, don't get me wrong, I'm happy about. But it's like teams are going to quickly gravitate to him because you don't have Ayuk in, and, I just don't know, if this rushing attack's going to be able to carry him because it looked average, obviously. And obviously if Purdy's having to run like 5 times, like, what does it tell you? These guys aren't getting open, or he doesn't feel confident to throw it to them. Now, Seattle got kind of just the bad, unlucky. Sam Darnold gets unlucky. He's going to throw and the ball nicks his lineman's bicep or whatever it was. They didn't have a good rushing attack either, when obviously this is another running back duo that I'm very high on that, could be a lot better. JSN does really well. Clearly the workhorse like he was last year type of thing. But then you have Cooper Kupp with barely any targets and nobody else with more than 3 targets, which is not good to me, type of thing. JSN with 2 fumbles is, kind of crazy, type of thing. And just overall, a game where it's like, I think it shows that this Seattle defense is going to be very good, which I'm not surprised by. And that's why I thought that, like, why are people doubting the Seattle so much? They were like, oh, there's no way that they win this game. Oh, San Fran's going to be so good. But it's like, just a very overall sloppy game, in all honesty, that I think both these teams need a lot to clean up type of thing. And that, I guess the NFC West, it does look kind of like nothing crazy. So it looks kind of like last year. Moving on to Broncos Titans. I think the Titans did a lot better than like what it looks like right here. They were pretty close and keeping it close at 10-10, I think, for the longest time. Or sorry, 12-10 or whatever it was, and then the Broncos just pulled away. Obviously, they had that delay at halftime that didn't really, I think, affect much. But Bo Nix throwing 2 picks, this is kind of, maybe he has a slump. But then I was also thinking last year that the Tennessee Titans on paper have a very good defense. And, you got guys like McCreary who came down with a pick. You have guys, who got the other interception, I guess. Xavier Woods. But Roger McCreary, crafty veteran. And then they have these other guys that are very, very good. Quandre Diggs. Why can't I remember his name? L'Jarius Sneed, who you obviously brought in last year to address your defense. You still have Jeffrey Simmons, obviously not a pick artist, but very, very good. And I think this is a defense that, if it stays healthy, it'll really help Tennessee and their ability to make these games winnable for Cam Ward. Now, Cam Ward struggling against the Denver defense, that does not surprise me. They were one of the best defenses last year, top 5, if I'm being honest. And he didn't throw a pick. It didn't get a touchdown either. But it's like he was, and got sacked a lot, but kept his composure. So, and without really a running game, if we're being honest with you. And it's not like things went their way, like Pollard with a fumble. Cam Ward also had a fumble off a sack, but this is just a very experienced team type of thing. And I think that overall, you got to be kind of happy with your quarterback's play because he didn't just throw the game away, type of thing, which just tends to happen with the immaturity of younger quarterbacks, So overall, I think that Denver, while it wasn't the prettiest win, they're happy for it. And they're tied with the Chargers and the division, type of thing. Packers-Lions. Obviously, I watched this game. Goff, I think, really was throwing these shorter passes type of thing, and my Packers were swarming to the ball. Not a lot of yak type of thing on this team. The play calling for Detroit, not anything crazy, and not the creativity that we're used to. And, Goff really panicked. And I think Micah Parsons, while some people were like, oh, he wasn't always against Sewell, he was really used as that X factor guy who's going to rotate around the whole line. And I still remember some plays where, he's getting double teamed by Ratledge and Sewell, two big guys that I think Sewell has like 70 or 80 pounds on Micah or something like that. And then you take Ratledge, who's a bruiser, mauler rookie guard, and it's like they've got how many pounds on Micah, and he's still like doing this sort of thing. And it's wild because, I mean, obviously on a limited snap count, but he was saying he was tired after the game. I mean, he obviously, a lot of adrenaline, I'm sure. But if they're able, if the defense plays like this where they are swarming to the tackle type of thing, then it's going to be very tough, on a lot of teams, like not just the Lions. And I think the Lions, the one player that I was definitely getting worried about, even though he obviously didn't have a crazy game or anything like that, was Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Gibbs was really trying to hustle. He obviously did have a long run of 14 yards, but boy, were the Packers just swarming him, and they could not run it up the middle, and he was hustling to get to the edge and just could not against this well-coached defense type of thing, of the Packers. So, you look at even the guys that they, had and, did stuff with. I mean, Amon-Ra didn't do super, super well. Jahmyr Gibbs, they essentially were like, yeah, you're going to be our kind of dump off, kid, this game. And that's why Goff kind of had a high clip. I don't think he really diagnosed that much or threw it downfield that much. And even when he did, Evan Williams picked him off, when he tried to force something because pressure was right in his face, like a second after the snap by Micah Parsons and, other people. And then, my Packers, I liked how they came out fast. I liked how Jordan Love distributed the ball. Obviously, he didn't have to play some crazy game, and I think the Lions defense did give them problems a little bit in the second half where they slowed down. Obviously, 17 scored and then 10 in the final quarter type of thing to close this game out. But overall, just a very, very good game. You got so many people involved, type of thing that it's like, this is kind of what I expected last year. And it's like, granted, they don't have Watson right now. They had everybody else, they had Wicks, Reed, weren't hurt, even though they were on the injury report. And just overall a game that's, a true spread offense where it's like no one is still wide receiver one, even though I would like to say that I think Dobbs was really showing that he's going to lead by example in this group and he's going to try and dominate type of thing. But overall, I think the Lions are still going to be like a good, a team that's going to beat a lot of teams, but it is hard to say they're going to be as dominant. And I was saying this to people all offseason. I don't think people realize how important the play caller is and the guy who's prepping them, and telling them how they're going to play and do on offense. I just don't think so. And Goff clearly throwing downfield is kind of an issue. And it was when they played the Commanders. Now, technically their second record, regular season or postseason loss type of thing, where it's like the Commanders were able to put these guys off and, pressure was being forced on Goff, who can't really escape all the time, because of his lack of mobility. But overall, I think my Packers really kind of, put it together finally as, still the youngest team in the league, but now have years of camaraderie and were healthy. And with a couple of other pieces that, to me, they didn't. I mean, the new pieces, like, they did good things. Besides Parsons, obviously, I'm not discrediting what Parsons did, you guys. I'm talking about like, Aaron Banks. I'm talking about my goodness, why can't I think right now? The new rookies, Golden and Williams, and. Overall, I think that the team just played as a complete team effort, and that is scary this early in the season Moving on to Rams-Texans, I think this was a boring game. The Rams, obviously, they had 14 through quarters. I was kind of predicting this, though. These defenses on these teams, I think, are the strength of these teams. I like Stafford, and I think a lot of people go after him saying he's overrated and that sort of thing. The guy can still sling it and has good arm angles and has a very good wide receiver room, probably maybe the most complete receiver room he's ever had. Upgrading Cooper Kupp with Devontae Adams, Puka Nakua's obviously still just going to do what he's going to do, type of thing. And, they didn't really incorporate too many other guys, but I think Devontae Adams and Puka Nakua as a two-man wrecking crew can dominate most games. And then it's like looking at Houston, they still had issues with their O-line. And that is what, everyone was like, this is going to hold them back. Why'd they get rid of Tunzel? Sure, he had a good amount of penalties, but he was a good left tackle. They had a decent rushing attack with Chubb. I think Chubb does have something to prove, and I think he's going to have some in the tank now that he's, a couple years removed from his ACL tear. And, but overall, just, I think they need to rush it a bit more. I think they do need to be more of a rushing team type of thing, because you look at this and you look at, these targets type of thing and, the amount of yards that your guys were getting. Don't get me wrong. I like that Jaden Higgins, popped off type of thing, but it's like Nico Collins, you're not able to really get involved type of thing. Jalen Noel, another young player, that didn't really do that much either, but I think that you are built kind of for the ground. And that's really got to be kind of your thing to keep Stroud safe and upright, because he did suffer, I think, the second most sacks last year. And it's like you don't want this guy getting hurt because it dooms your whole team, But overall, just a very good game, I think, by the Rams. Obviously nothing like, crazy points-wise. But the defense showed that, hey, we're not going to let up to an aspiring young good rookie, Nico Collins, and then it's like, Jalen Noel, who I expect to be very good. He, this wide receiver class was pretty damn good, and especially if he's your third option, like he can cook type of thing. But overall, just looking at, the Raiders, 3 sacks, very well deserved type of thing. But and on your defense, Will Anderson, not surprised, tackle for a loss. He looks like he's primed for a very, very good year, type of thing. And then you got Danielle Hunter, who, quiet game, but he's a guy who could also take over. So props to the Rams. They closed out a close one, and I think that they'll only build and correct things off of this, having, a very good offense. Bills-Ravens, probably the craziest week 1 game I've ever watched, and it probably is, there might be recency bias in that, but good God, this game was, it's like they had played each other 2 weeks in a row, almost, where it's like, man, the game last year, and granted, Lamar Jackson was, kind of rough in that game. And this game, clearly, he was really taking over, type of thing. And it's like, you think he would have more carries type of thing, but what a crazy game. And then Derrick Henry, good Lord, man. Who wants to tackle this guy? And it's like, what is he eating? But what a nut. And when they showed me that he's doing uphill weight dragging behind his back stuff, I'm like, no wonder, you guys. And it's like Lamar Jackson and Buffalo's defense definitely played, a pretty good game besides the run game. But it's just, this is the cheat code of the Ravens. And it's wild because Buffalo, they just stay in it the whole game. They don't get paranoid. They don't get panicked. And they looked like they had been playing for weeks and weeks and weeks because they had the composure, to be like, we can still win this. And then the fact that Ed Oliver, God, what a player. And it's like, is able to create a fumble off of Derrick Henry. Nuts. This felt like a playoff game, and these two teams are just it looks like they're going to be there at the end. Like this game, that maybe every other team watched because it was Sunday Night Football, Good Lord, the measuring stick has started off blazing high for these two teams. So looking to it, I already mentioned the Derrick Henry fumble, but that is really the difference of this game. The late turnover that, type of thing. But it's like, goodness, I think this defense you can't really, critique these defenses super hard. I know people were going after Jair Alexander, but it's like you're playing against a guy like Josh Allen, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but it almost doesn't matter who you have at corner, type of thing. And it's like these defenses are going to be banging after this game for whoever they play, because they are not going to play another crazy hard team like this until maybe these two meet again in the playoffs. But yeah, overall, what a crazy game. And moving on to a less serious note, I don't think I've laughed harder. Obviously as a Packers fan, it benefits me to see these two struggle bus it for the whole game, type of thing. Chicago, by all right, should have won this game. It's like, good Lord. And like Caleb Williams, what did he complete his first 10 or 9 passes or something like that? And I was like, man, he's doing mostly checkdowns. Like, why, people are rooting. It's Soldier Field type of thing. JJ McCarthy just seemingly couldn't get it to anybody, type of thing. And the pass rush looked pretty good, even though I'll say this. I think the left tackle they used to replace Darrisaw, clearly he was a vulnerability, so it made it easier. So it's like, if Darrisaw plays, I think JJ McCarthy has a much better game. But here's the thing. I do think that even though you look at these stats, he had a better game than Caleb. He could actually pass it downfield. The interception was just him getting impatient, which is like what I said with Cam Ward. Cam Ward could have easily done like a forced pass where he's going for broke, type of thing. But like JJ McCarthy, obviously a little bit younger, even though he was drafted last year, hadn't played, played a crazy amount, type of thing. But JJ McCarthy proved he can sling it, and he gunned some passes into the end zone. He won this game for them, type of thing. And it's like, I liked what Jordan Mason brought. He did good. Aaron Jones didn't quite have the effect that I thought he would, except for with that pass late in the game, type of thing. And then Eric Wilson, being kind of a momentum shift, even though it wasn't a crazy blocked punt where it gave them crazy good field position, but he blocks a punt, which gets the team pumped, type of thing. But Jefferson kind of rough I'm assuming, for missing some practice with his hammy. Said he was fully healthy. They said he was fully healthy, type of thing. But normally I wouldn't say a pass goes through his hands and, down his belly, for an incompletion on something that he should be able to have. And it's, credit to O'Connell, because he definitely kept McCarthy calm. And then once they got momentum, they ran away with it, type of thing. But Chicago, I never was a Caleb believer. I just don't think he has the mental. I don't think he reads the field well enough. He had guys that were downfield, and Aikman kept pointing out there was 3 or 4 times, type of thing. And then late in the game, when they actually needed him to play and he's throwing downfield, he was throwing just uncatchable footballs. And it's like, and then, that intentional grounding where it's like, what was he doing? Like, he escaped, happens to slip, who knows how, terrible Soldier Field, I guess, and just didn't look very good. And then nearly gets DJ Moore concussed for next week. Like, it's insane. I'm sorry, but this was a rough outing. And the thing about it is that Ben Johnson leaves the Lions, who had a stacked offensive unit, good O-line, good running backs. And don't get me wrong, DeAndre Swift didn't look bad. He wasn't bad by any means, but there's no way that they're going to be able to have the same style of offense, which I think is going to limit, maybe not limit Ben Johnson's creativity, but limit how much they can execute what he would like to execute, if that makes any sense, because of, the O-line, because of the O-line and the running backs. And it's like, they had so many penalties, too, mental errors, type of thing. And that's not going to make it easier on Caleb. So this is kind of the fear that I had for the Bears, even though it's like, I'm happy to see them lose and struggle and suffer type of thing as a Packers fan. But this is literally what, my fear was with them, is that, yeah, you get this marquee guy, but he comes from a team that has so much talent because they drafted and hit on so many of these guys. So they had cheap contracts. But he goes to a team that, don't get me wrong, they have talent, but we'll see. Week one, like I said. But overall, that's kind of my thoughts on this. I think, too, the Vikings, I think they looked like a team that, they were kind of playing slow and they were kind of seeing what the Bears were going to do. And then once Flores kind of put the pedal to the metal, that's really when Caleb looked panicked and he didn't look comfortable. And it was rough, for him. And don't get me wrong, the Bears aren't going to play a defense that can invoke so much pressure every single week. But it's like, if you can't beat the Vikings, are you going to be able to advance in the playoffs? Are you going to be able to beat a team like the Packers now that can force crazy pressure? It just doesn't bode well to me the way this game played out. You put up 24, but you seemingly did nothing once they actually turned on their defense, with Flores. I think they had like -1 yards or something at one point, and then entire fourth quarter, like halfway through the quarter or something nuts. Type of thing. But overall, I'm happy. These two teams struggled because I'm a Packers fan, but I think that the issues the Vikings had will be easier to fix than the issues that the Bears had, if I'm being honest with you. So, and I mean, it seemed like a totally different game once they actually decided to play and, play to the best of their ability. But, tell me what you guys think in the comments, about these games type of thing. I do think that it was a really fun week of games, and also watch for my Thursday night football matchup. I will be releasing that tomorrow. But as always, this is CastCast. I'm your host, Casty Streeter, and go Pack Go.